Mom always said, your brother is going places. While I was just getting by, he's getting by in prison now for fraud. I'm going places like my second home in Colorado. Mom calls me now, still talks about brother's potential while asking for money. Hey Reddit, my brother spent our entire childhood being praised for his potential, while I was just the disappointment who worked with his hands. Now he's serving 8 years for securities fraud, and I own 2 properties outright. But guess who Mom still thinks is the success story? Buckle up, this one's a journey. I'm Jake, 34 male, and I've been a commercial HVAC technician for the past 12 years. Started as an apprentice making $13 an hour, crawling through attics in 110-degree heat while my family acted like I was wasting my life. Now I run my own HVAC company, pull in around $180,000 a year, and own my house plus a cabin in Breckenridge that I rent out when I'm not using it. My younger brother Tyler is 31, golden child since birth. Everything he touched turned to gold in my parents' eyes, even when it was obviously fool's gold. While I was learning how to wire thermostats and replace compressor units, Tyler was getting business degrees and talking about disrupting industries. He had the gift of making complete nonsense sound revolutionary. Our parents treated us like we were from different species. I got lectures about making something of myself. Tyler got standing ovations for showing up to family dinner. When I bought my first house at 26, my dad's response was, well, at least you'll have somewhere to live. When Tyler got hired at some startup nobody had heard of, they threw a party and invited the whole neighborhood. The favoritism wasn't subtle. For my high school graduation, I got a toolbox and a handshake. For Tyler's college graduation, they bought him a car. When I completed my master HVAC certification, Mom asked when I was going to get a real career. When Tyler got promoted to Senior Strategic Development Coordinator at a company with 5 employees, Dad bought a round of drinks for everyone at their country club, but let me back up and give you the full picture of how this dysfunction developed over 2 decades. Growing up, the difference in how we were treated was like night and day. I'm talking polar opposite treatment from the same 2 parents living in the same house. I was the practical kid, liked taking things apart, fixing stuff, understanding how machines worked. Built my first go-kart at 12, using scrap parts from the garage. Dad looked at it and said it was nice, then went back to watching Tyler's Little League game. Tyler struck out every single time that season, but Dad acted like he was watching the World Series. School was where the divide really became obvious. I was a solid B student who actually tried. Tyler coasted with C's and D's, but always had excuses that Mom and Dad ate up like candy. My B- in chemistry? Disappointing and showed lack of dedication. Tyler's D in algebra? The teacher didn't understand his learning style. When I was 15, I started working weekends at Mr. Patterson's HVAC company. He was this old guy who'd been doing heating and cooling for 40 years and needed help with the physical work his knees couldn't handle anymore. Started me at $10 an hour cash, taught me everything from basic maintenance to complex system diagnostics. My parents acted like this was a temporary phase before I got serious about college. Mom would tell her friends I was finding myself, like I was backpacking through Europe instead of learning a skilled trade that people actually needed. Meanwhile, Tyler spent his weekends sleeping until 2 p.m. and playing video games. But that was fine because he was recharging his mental batteries. The college conversation was brutal. I didn't want to go to a 4-year university and rack up debt for a degree I'd never use. I wanted to go to trade school, get certified, and start making real money. You'd think I'd announced plans to join a cult. Trade school? Mom said, like I'd suggested becoming a professional juggler. But you're smart enough for real college. Real college. Like learning a trade wasn't real education. Like knowing how to diagnose a failing heat exchanger or properly charge a refrigerant system wasn't valuable knowledge. They acted like working with my hands was something to be ashamed of. Tyler, meanwhile, announced he wanted to study business administration. You'd think he'd discovered the cure for disease. Dad immediately started talking about MBA programs and executive positions. Mom started telling everyone her son was going to be a business leader. I went to technical college for HVAC. Cost me $8,000 total, took 18 months, and I walked out with certifications that immediately got me a $22 per hour job at a commercial HVAC company. By the time Tyler finished his bachelor's degree with $65,000 in student loans, I was making $30 per hour and had zero debt. But guess which one of us was considered the success? Family dinners became a special kind of torture. Tyler would talk about his business classes, using terms like synergy and paradigm shifts and disruptive innovation. My parents would hang on every word like he was delivering the Gettysburg Address. I'd mention landing a big commercial contract or fixing a particularly tricky system, and I'd get polite nods before the conversation went back to Tyler's brilliance. The worst was when extended family came over. Uncle Frank would ask what we were up to, and Mom would launch into Tyler's accomplishments like she was reading a resume. Tyler's taking advanced courses in strategic business development. He's really going places. Then she'd glance at me and add, Jake's doing HVAC work. He's just getting by, just getting by. That became her standard line for describing my career. Never mind that I was making decent money, building valuable skills, and actually supporting myself. I was just getting by while Tyler was going places. Tyler graduated with his business degree and immediately started applying to companies with fancy-sounding names. He'd interview at startups with names like Synergy Solutions or Paradigm Innovations and act like he was being recruited by Fortune 500 companies. Most of these places had 6 employees working out of converted warehouses, but Tyler treated every interview like it was with Google. He finally got hired at something called Apex Capital Growth Partners. They were a small investment advisory firm, basically 3 guys in suits who'd convinced some dentists and small business owners to let them manage their retirement accounts. Tyler's title was Junior Investment Analyst, which sounded impressive until you realized he was basically a glorified assistant who made coffee and formatted PowerPoint presentations. But according to my parents, Tyler had arrived. Mom updated her Facebook status. So proud of my son Tyler starting his career in high finance. High finance. The place had 4 clients and operated out of a strip mall between a dry cleaner and a nail salon. Meanwhile, I'd been promoted to lead technician at my company and was managing a crew of 3 other guys on commercial projects. We were installing HVAC systems in new office buildings, shopping centers, medical facilities. Real work that required expertise and generated serious revenue. My parents' response? That's nice, dear. Did you hear Tyler might get promoted to senior analyst? The money difference was already obvious. I was pulling in around $65,000 a year by the time Tyler started his first real job at $42,000. But my parents acted like I was one step above homeless, while Tyler was basically Warren Buffett. At 26, I made a down payment on a modest 3-bedroom house in a decent neighborhood. 20% down, 15-year mortgage, monthly payments I could easily afford. This was a huge milestone for me. Actual property ownership before age 30, I was stupid proud of this accomplishment. My parents came over for the housewarming, walked through, made appropriate sounds, then Dad said, well, at least you won't have to pay rent anymore. That was it. No congratulations, no acknowledgement that this was a significant achievement for someone my age. Just a statement of the obvious, followed by a conversation about Tyler's new apartment in a trendy part of downtown that cost $1,800 a month. Tyler's apartment had exposed brick walls and industrial lighting, the kind of place that looks cool in photos but has 0 storage and thin walls. He was paying twice my mortgage for 900 square feet that he didn't even own. But my parents thought it was sophisticated and urban, while my actual house was just practical. Around this time, Tyler started getting into what he called alternative investment strategies. He'd talk about cryptocurrency and NFTs and day trading, like he'd discovered some secret the rest of the world hadn't figured out. My parents would listen with rapt attention while he explained blockchain technology or whatever buzzword he'd learned that week. I tried pointing out that most day traders lose money, and cryptocurrency is incredibly volatile, but I was just the HVAC guy who didn't understand high finance. Tyler was the expert because he'd taken some online courses and read a few books. Never mind that he was still living paycheck to paycheck while I was building actual wealth through boring old real estate and retirement accounts. That's when things started getting weird with Tyler's job situation. He switched companies 3 times in 2 years, each move supposedly a massive upgrade. Each new title sounded more impressive than the last portfolio development manager, strategic investment coordinator, senior financial analyst. What I noticed, but my parents didn't. Each of these companies was smaller than the last, and Tyler's job descriptions got vaguer. When I asked what he actually did day to day, he'd give these word salad answers about optimizing capital allocation strategies and analyzing market position dynamics. Basically, nothing concrete. He started dressing more expensive. Designer suits, luxury watches, $100 haircuts. Would show up to family dinners driving lease cars that cost more per month than my mortgage. My parents thought he'd made it big. I thought he was drowning in debt, trying to look successful. Turned out we were both right. The first sign something was seriously wrong came when Tyler showed up at my house on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in my garage organizing tools when he pulled up in a BMW I'd never seen before. New ride? I asked. Lease. Tax write-off for business expenses, he said, which I later learned was complete nonsense since he wasn't actually self-employed. He wanted to borrow 5 grand, needed it for some investment opportunity that was time-sensitive, would pay me back in 2 weeks with interest. The whole pitch had this desperate edge that made my instincts scream danger. What kind of investment? I asked. He launched into some explanation about arbitrage opportunities in cryptocurrency markets. Something about buying on one exchange and selling on another for guaranteed profit. The way he described it sounded exactly like every get-rich-quick scheme ever invented. If it's guaranteed profit, why do you need to borrow money? I asked. His face twitched. My capital's currently tied up in other positions. This is a short-term liquidity issue. Translation. I'm broke and desperate, I told him no. He got angry, said I was being selfish after he'd always supported me. I pointed out he'd never supported me. He'd barely acknowledged my existence unless he needed something. He left without another word. That was in March. By June, things had escalated significantly. Tyler suddenly had money. Lots of it. Started posting photos from expensive restaurants, luxury hotels, taking trips to Vegas and Miami. He bought a Tesla, moved into a high-rise apartment with downtown views. My parents acted like he'd won the lottery. Tyler's investments are really paying off, Mom told me at a family barbecue. He's doing so well, you should ask him for advice. I should ask my little brother for financial advice. The same kid who'd needed to borrow 5 grand 3 months earlier was now supposedly making enough to fund a lifestyle that probably cost $15,000 a month. The math didn't work, but my parents believed every word. Tyler told them he developed a proprietary trading algorithm that was generating consistent returns. Said he was managing a portfolio of high-net-worth clients who valued his expertise. My dad started bragging to his golf buddies about his son, the successful investor. What Tyler was actually doing was running a Ponzi scheme. I didn't find this out until later, but here's how his operation worked. He'd convinced about 25 people, mostly friends of the family, my parents' social circle, some of his college buddies, to let him manage their investment accounts. Promised returns of 12 to 15% annually, which is high, but not impossibly so. The first few quarters, he paid those returns exactly as promised. People were thrilled. They told their friends. More investors came in. Tyler's reputation as a financial genius spread through their country club and church groups. He wasn't actually investing anything, just paying old investors with new investors' money and keeping a healthy chunk for himself to fund his lifestyle classic Ponzi scheme. Bernie Madoff light, and my parents were eating it up like he discovered something revolutionary instead of committing securities fraud. Around August, Tyler made his big pitch to Mom and Dad. Wanted them to let him manage their retirement savings. Promised he could double their nest egg in 5 years through his proven strategies and exclusive investment opportunities. They'd worked their whole lives to save about $400,000 in various retirement accounts. He wanted all of it. I found out about this plan when Dad called asking if I thought it was a good idea. This was notable because Dad never asked my opinion about anything I told him absolutely not. Tyler had no legitimate credentials, wasn't registered with any regulatory body, and his returns were suspiciously consistent. Real investing involved volatility. Guaranteed returns were a red flag. You're just jealous, Dad said. Tyler's finally successful and you can't stand it. They gave Tyler $350,000 to manage. I found out later they kept $50,000 in their original accounts just in case, which showed they had some survival instinct left even if their judgment was broken. By September, I was getting established in my own business growth. I'd left the commercial HVAC company and started my own operation. Just me and 2 employees at first, but we were landing contracts and building a reputation for quality work. I bought my first work van outright, $32,000 cash for a Ford Transit with all the equipment I needed. My parents barely acknowledged this milestone. When I told them I'd started my own company, Mom said, "That's nice, dear. Did you hear Tyler's managing over $2 million in client assets now?" $2 million, Jesus. The more people he roped into his scheme, the bigger the inevitable collapse would be. By October, I wasn't talking to Tyler at all. He'd shown up at my house twice more asking for money. First $10,000, then $25,000. Both times I refused. Both times he accused me of being bitter about his success. The irony was painful. My business was actually doing well. By the end of my first year, I'd grossed about $220,000 in revenue. After expenses and paying my 2 employees, I was netting around $75,000 personally. Not bad for year 1. I bought a small cabin near Breckenridge as an investment property, a fixer-upper that needed work but had good bones and was in a prime location for rentals. Spent 3 months of weekends renovating that cabin. New HVAC system. Obviously, updated electrical, fresh paint, new appliances. Listed it on vacation rental sites and started booking immediately. The rental income covered the mortgage plus generated extra cash flow. When I told my parents about this investment property, Mom literally said, "That's a lot of risk for someone just getting by." Just getting by, I owned 2 properties, ran a successful business, and had more cash in the bank than I'd ever had in my life. But I was just getting by while Tyler was going places with his Ponzi scheme and leased luxury cars. Then everything fell apart. The collapse came in November. I was at a job site installing a new rooftop unit when my phone started blowing up. Calls from my parents, texts from relatives, voicemails from people I barely knew. I ignored them until lunch break, then listened to Mom's message. "Jake, something's happened with Tyler's business. Please call me back immediately." I called. Mom was hysterical. Dad was on the extension, voice shaking. The Securities and Exchange Commission had raided Tyler's office. Agents in FBI jackets walking out with boxes of files and computer equipment. Tyler had been arrested that morning. "They're saying he defrauded investors," Mom sobbed. "It's not true. Someone must have made false accusations. Tyler would never do something like that." But Tyler absolutely would do something like that, and apparently had been doing it for about 18 months. The investigation had been going on for months. Federal agents had been building a case while Tyler kept posting Instagram photos from expensive restaurants and taking weekend trips to ski resorts. The details came out over the following weeks. Tyler had taken approximately $2.8 million from 43 investors, promised returns he couldn't deliver, paid early investors with new investors' money, used about $900,000 to fund his personal lifestyle. The other $1.9 million? Gone. Lost through bad trades, spent on his apartment and cars, burned through like he was trying to set a record. My parents' $350,000? Completely gone. Tyler had burned through their retirement savings in less than 3 months, using it to pay off earlier investors and maintain his lifestyle. They were left with the $50,000 they'd kept in their original accounts and basically had to start over financially in their early 60s. But here's the part that still makes me crazy. They defended him, even with the evidence, even with federal prosecutors laying out exactly what he'd done, even with 43 victims who'd lost everything. My parents insisted Tyler had made mistakes but wasn't a criminal. They talked about him being young and inexperienced, about how the system was rigged against entrepreneurs, about how the government was making an example of him. The trial took 8 months. The evidence was overwhelming. Tyler had kept sloppy records of his scheme, probably because he was too arrogant to think he'd get caught bank statements showing client deposits going straight to his personal accounts, emails where he promised returns. He knew he couldn't deliver text messages about buying luxury items with what he called house money. He tried defending himself by claiming he genuinely believed his trading strategies would work, said he'd made honest mistakes, not criminal fraud. The jury didn't buy it. Neither did the judge. Tyler got 8 years in federal prison plus ordered to pay full restitution of $2.8 million. Given that he was broke and had no assets, that restitution order was basically theoretical. He'd be making monthly $50 payments for the rest of his life and never come close to paying back what he stole. During the sentencing hearing, the judge called it a calculated scheme of deception that destroyed the financial security of hardworking people who trusted you. Mom cried through the whole thing. Dad sat stone-faced. Tyler stood there in his cheap suit looking stunned that consequences had finally caught up with him. I wasn't in the courtroom. I watched it happen through news coverage like everyone else. Part of me felt vindicated. I'd been right about Tyler all along. Bigger part felt sick watching my parents' world collapse. The aftermath was brutal for everyone except me. My parents had to sell their house. Between the lost retirement savings and the legal bills from trying to defend Tyler, they couldn't afford the mortgage anymore. Moved into a small rental house in a cheaper part of town, Dad had to keep working instead of retiring. Mom picked up part-time work at a boutique. Their friends from the country club stopped calling, not because my parents had done anything wrong, but because many of them had been Tyler's victims. Hard to maintain friendships when your son stole someone's retirement savings. Tyler's ex-girlfriends came out of the woodwork with stories about him using them for money. His college friends talked about loans he'd never repaid. Former coworkers mentioned suspicious behavior nobody had wanted to report. Turned out a lot of people had known something was off, but nobody wanted to be the one to say it. The entire extended family learned about the fraud through news coverage. Aunts and uncles I barely talked to were calling my parents asking what happened. Some were sympathetic. Others wanted nothing to do with the whole situation. Family gatherings became awkward and tense when they happened at all. Through all of this, I stayed focused on my own business. My second year went even better than the first. I'd hired 2 more employees and was running multiple crews on different projects. The cabin rental was consistently booked. My personal house was paid off ahead of schedule because I'd been making extra principal payments. I didn't gloat. Didn't say I told you so even though I'd absolutely told them so. Just kept my head down, worked hard, and built something real while Tyler's fake empire burned to the ground. But my family's dysfunction wasn't done yet. Not even close. Tyler had been in prison for about 6 months when the phone call started. First was Mom. Wanted to know if I could help with some expenses. They were struggling financially and needed someone to step up as family. I asked what kind of expenses. She mentioned their rent, car payment, groceries, basically everything. How much are we talking? I asked. Maybe $2,000 a month? Just until we get back on our feet. $2,000 monthly to subsidize their lifestyle after they'd ignored every warning I'd given them about Tyler. After decades of treating me like the disappointing son who was just getting by. After throwing their retirement savings at my fraud brother, because they believed his nonsense over my common sense, I said no. Mom was shocked. But they were family, and family helped each other through hard times. I pointed out family also listened when someone tried to warn them about obvious scams. That's not fair, she said. We didn't know Tyler was lying. I told you exactly what was happening. You called me jealous. Silence. Then she started crying. This was manipulation. Weaponized tears designed to make me feel guilty for having boundaries. I told her I needed to go and hung up. Dad called an hour later. Same request, different approach. Didn't ask for help. Demanded it. I was doing well. They were struggling, and the right thing to do was support them. I reminded him I'd tried to warn them about Tyler multiple times. He'd told me I was just jealous of Tyler's success. This isn't about Tyler, Dad said. This is about helping your parents when they need it. No, this is about you facing consequences for your choices. You chose to ignore me and give your retirement savings to someone running an obvious Ponzi scheme. That's on you. He called me selfish and heartless. Typical. I was selfish for not funding their lifestyle, but they weren't selfish for dismissing me my entire life. The logic made sense only in their heads. I stopped answering their calls after that. Let them go to voicemail. The messages got increasingly desperate and then angry. Mom would cry about how she'd sacrificed everything for her children, and this was the thanks she got. Dad would rant about disappointing sons who abandoned their family in times of need. Never once did either of them acknowledge the years of favoritism, the dismissive treatment, or the fact that I'd tried to save them from their own bad decision. They wanted support without accountability. I wasn't interested. What made it worse was that they started visiting Tyler in prison regularly. Every other weekend, they'd make the 3-hour drive to see him. They'd put money in his commissary account so he could buy snacks and sundries. They'd talk about him like he was the victim instead of the criminal. Meanwhile, I was the one who'd actually built something, who'd made responsible choices, who owned property and ran a successful business. But I was the bad son because I wouldn't bankroll their refusal to accept reality. The cabin was generating solid income by this point. Between personal use and rental bookings, it was basically paying for itself, plus creating extra monthly revenue. I'd upgraded the HVAC system, added a hot tub, improved the internet service. The place was booked nearly every weekend during ski season. My business had grown to 6 employees running 3 crews. We were handling major commercial contracts, building relationships with property management companies, becoming known as the reliable HVAC outfit in our region. I was personally netting around $140,000 annually after all expenses. I bought new equipment, invested in my employees' training, maintained a cash reserve for slow seasons. Everything you're supposed to do when running a legitimate business. No flash, no status symbols, just steady growth based on actual value creation. During this time, I started dating Nicole. She was an occupational therapist at a rehabilitation center, down to earth, and had zero interest in superficial displays of wealth. We met at a friend's barbecue, started talking about our work, and hit it off immediately. Third date, I told her about my family situation. The golden child brother, the years of favoritism, the Ponzi scheme, the prison sentence, my parents still defending him. Expected her to think I was exaggerating or being dramatic. Instead, she said, "Wow, that's incredibly messed up. Good for you for setting boundaries." That's how I knew she was a keeper. No pressure to forgive, no lectures about family being forever, just acknowledgement that the situation was exactly as dysfunctional as it sounded. We'd been dating about 8 months when Mom called from a different number. I answered thinking it was a work call. "Jake, thank goodness. I've been trying to reach you." I almost hung up. Should have hung up, but curiosity got the better of me. "What do you want, Mom?" She launched into this story about how hard things were. Dad's hours had been cut at work. She wasn't getting enough shifts at the boutique. Their rent was going up. They were barely making ends meet. And Tyler needed their support during this difficult time. Tyler has a difficult time? I said. He's in prison for stealing $3 million. That's not a difficult time. That's justice. Don't be cruel. He's still your brother. Is he? Because I don't remember him acting like a brother when he was living in luxury apartments and posting vacation photos. I don't remember him acting like a brother when he was burning through your retirement savings. But now that I'm successful and he's in prison, suddenly we're family? She started crying again. Same manipulation tactic. She didn't understand why I was being so cold. Tyler made mistakes, but he had potential. Once he got out, he could rebuild his life if he had family support. There it was. Potential. Still talking about Tyler's potential after everything he'd done. Mom, Tyler doesn't have potential. Tyler has a felony conviction and 8 years of prison time. His potential is gone because he used it to commit fraud. How can you say that about your own brother? Pretty easily after watching you defend him for 30 years, while treating me like I was wasting my life learning an actual trade. The conversation went in circles for another 10 minutes before I finally hung up. Blocked the number she'd called from. She'd just find another one, but it bought me time. What really got to me was the refusal to acknowledge reality. Tyler was in federal prison. He'd destroyed dozens of lives. He'd stolen from his own parents. There was no coming back from this. No redemption arc. No potential to fulfill just years of consequences for his choices. But in my parents' minds, Tyler was still the golden child who'd made mistakes, while I was still just getting by despite owning property and running a successful business. The delusion was so complete it was almost impressive. Tyler had been in prison about 2 years when the letters started. First one showed up in my mailbox with the prison return address. I almost threw it away unopened. Should have. But I was curious what Tyler possibly had to say after everything that happened. The letter was 6 pages of small handwriting. Started with an apology that sounded copy-pasted from some prison rehabilitation program. Then moved into self-pity about how hard prison was, how he'd made mistakes but was learning from them, how he hoped we could rebuild our relationship. Third page got to the real point. He wanted me to put money in his commissary account. Needed funds for basic necessities, phone calls to family, maybe some books to further his education. Suggested I could send $100 monthly, which wouldn't be much for someone doing as well as I was. I burned the letter. Second letter arrived 3 weeks later. Same basic structure, but more aggressive. He was my brother, and I owed him support during his lowest point. He'd always been there for me. Completely false. And now I was abandoning him when he needed me most. Mentioned that mom and dad were struggling financially and could barely afford to visit him regularly. Implied I should be helping them too. Said the family was falling apart, and I was the only one with resources to keep everyone together. I burned that letter too. The letters kept coming. Every few weeks, another attempt. Sometimes guilt-tripping, sometimes angry, sometimes pretending we'd had this amazing relationship I was throwing away. Each one asked for money in increasingly direct terms. What I learned later, Tyler was sending similar letters to dozens of people. Former friends, distant relatives, anyone he thought might have sympathy or cash. He was still running scams from prison, just with a more limited reach. My parents kept calling from new numbers. I'd block each one. They'd find another. Eventually started using other relatives' phones. My aunt called saying she wanted to catch up, then immediately handed the phone to mom. I hung up and blocked my aunt. This went on for months. They were relentless. Every approach failed, but they kept trying new angles. Sometimes it was emotional manipulation, sometimes guilt, sometimes anger. Never once did they acknowledge the decades of favoritism or their role in enabling Tyler's criminal behavior. The business continued growing. I'd expanded to 8 employees and was turning down work because we were booked solid. The cabin rental was generating enough income that I was considering buying a second property. My personal house was paid off completely. Nicole and I got engaged. Simple proposal, nothing extravagant, just the two of us hiking in the mountains. She said yes before I finished asking. We started planning a small wedding. Immediate friends, her family, nobody from my side. Do you want to invite your parents? She asked while addressing save the dates. No, they'd just turn it into a drama about Tyler. She didn't argue. She'd met my parents exactly once, at a chance encounter at a restaurant. They'd spent the entire conversation talking about Tyler's potential and how he was going to bounce back after his release. Never asked Nicole a single question about herself. We set a date for October, booked a venue, kept the guest list under 50 people. Simple. focused on actually celebrating instead of performing for people who didn't care. 2 months before the wedding, Mom somehow got Nicole's number, called her directly, tried the whole manipulation routine. Nicole listened politely, then said, "I'm sorry you're struggling, but Jake has been very clear about his boundaries. I support his decision." Mom apparently launched into a speech about ungrateful children and family duty. Nicole interrupted, "Ma'am, your other son is in federal prison for stealing millions of dollars. Maybe focus on that situation before criticizing the son who's actually successful and law-abiding." Then hung up. I'd never loved Nicole more than when she told me that story. We got married in October. Beautiful ceremony, great food, amazing people. Nicole's family welcomed me like I'd always been part of their crew. My best man was my first employee, a guy named Kyle who'd been with me since day one. No drama, no tears about missing family, just genuine celebration. The day after our honeymoon, I got a letter from Dad. Not Tyler's usual commissary requests. This one was all Dad. Long explanation about how they'd spent their entire lives building our family, and I was destroying it by holding grudges. How Tyler had made mistakes but deserved forgiveness. How they needed financial help, and I was the only one who could provide it. How my success was partly due to their sacrifices, and I owed them support. The letter ended with an ultimatum: help them financially and rebuild our relationship, or accept that I'd chosen to abandon my family. I wrote one response. Kept it short. You spent my entire life telling me I was just getting by while praising Tyler for going places. Tyler's currently going places like the prison yard. I'm going places like my paid-off house and my cabin in Colorado. I chose success built on actual work instead of fraud. You chose to believe his lies and ignore my warnings. Those were your choices. These are the consequences. Don't contact me again. Mailed it. Felt like closing a chapter that should have ended years earlier. Tyler got out of prison after serving 6 years of his 8-year sentence. Good behavior, apparently, which is funny since his crime was literally being dishonest. Mom called from another new number to share the exciting news. I didn't answer, but she left a voicemail. Tyler was coming home. They were helping him get back on his feet. He'd changed so much in prison, learned from his mistakes, was ready to rebuild his life. She hoped I'd be willing to give him a second chance. Second chance at what, exactly? Stealing? Lying? Destroying people's financial security? The fact that she was already making excuses for him before he'd been out a week was perfect mom behavior. I heard through extended family that Tyler moved back in with my parents. They'd rented a 2-bedroom apartment after selling their house, and now all 3 of them were crammed in there. Tyler was working at a car wash, minimum wage, probably the hardest job he'd ever had. Being a convicted felon limited his employment options significantly. Turns out employers don't love hiring people with securities fraud on their record. The business degree he'd been so proud of? Completely worthless when combined with a federal conviction. My parents were still helping him financially, covering his share of rent, buying his food, probably giving him spending money. Same pattern, different decade. Tyler was 37 years old and being supported by his parents like he was still in high school. Meanwhile, I'd bought that second property I'd been considering. Another mountain cabin, this one near Keystone. Bigger than the first one, better location, needed less work. Nicole and I spent weekends fixing it up, turned it into a rental property that booked solid during ski season. The business was thriving. 12 employees now, 4 crews, more work than we could handle. I'd turned down 3 separate offers from larger companies wanting to acquire us. They saw the value in what we'd built, wanted to absorb our operation into their corporate structure. I wasn't interested. This business was mine, built from nothing, based on actual skills and hard work. No shortcuts, no fraud, no lies. Just quality work that generated legitimate income. Nicole and I were talking about kids. Maybe in a year or 2. We wanted to be established first, financially secure, able to provide stability. You know, like responsible adults do. One evening, I got a call from an unknown number. Answered thinking it was a work call. Tyler's voice came through. "Jake, it's me, Tyler." Should have hung up. Didn't. Wanted to hear what he'd possibly say. "I know we haven't talked in a while," he started. "I wanted to reach out, see if we could maybe get together sometime. Coffee or something. I've changed a lot." "Have you?" "Yeah, man. Prison was rough, but it gave me time to think about my choices, about what I did. I want to make things right. You stole $3 million, Tyler. Destroyed dozens of families. Burned through mom and dad's retirement savings. You can't make that right. I know I can't fully fix it, but I want to try. I'm working hard, trying to rebuild my life. Thought maybe you could offer some advice. You've always been good at the business stuff." The audacity. After everything, he wanted business advice from me. The brother he'd dismissed for years as just getting by now represented his best hope for guidance. Here's my advice, Tyler. Accept that you destroyed your potential the moment you chose fraud over honesty. You're a felon. You'll be making restitution payments for the rest of your life. Your opportunities are gone because of choices you made. That's not something I can fix. Come on, man. I'm trying here. No, you're looking for someone to make your life easier. That's not the same thing. You want actual advice? Stop expecting other people to solve problems you created. Hung up. Blocked the number. 2 days later, Mom called. Tyler had told her about our conversation. She couldn't believe how cold I'd been to my own brother, who was really trying to change. Couldn't I see how hard things were for him? Things are hard for the people he stole from, I said. Things are hard for the families whose retirement he destroyed. Tyler made his bed. He can lie in it. He's your brother. You should be supporting him. I support people who earn it through honest behavior. Tyler chose differently. She launched into a rant about family obligations and how I'd become a selfish person who only cared about money. The irony was apparently lost on her. I was selfish for not giving them money, but Tyler wasn't selfish for stealing millions. I hung up. She called back. I didn't answer. Later that week, I got another letter from Tyler. Longer this time. Pages about how much he'd changed, how prison had transformed him, how he'd found religion and wanted to make amends. Then, the real ask. He needed money to get an apartment and a car so he could get a better job and start his life over. Wanted $15,000. Just a loan. He'd pay it back once he got established. I should think of it as an investment in family. I didn't respond. Threw the letter away. That night, Nicole asked if I ever felt guilty about cutting them off. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true.